Well, hello, confirmands. It is really good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. I do have sad news for you. There is no confirmation class next week. It's Thanksgiving. I know you're sad about that. At any rate, we do have confirmation this week. This is lesson 8, if you can believe that already. Today we're talking about Jesus' life and the part of his life between his resurrection and his ascension. So we're going to cover this on November 16th together. Again, there's no confirmation on November 23rd, but on November 16th, 7 o'clock at Nelsonville, 8 o'clock online, lesson 8. Easter through Ascension, Jesus' life. All right. So again, why do we need to know these stories? Well, because Jesus loves you and because you're learning to love him. And if someone loves you, if you're learning to love someone, you want to know their stories. If you say, I love this person, but you don't care enough to know about their life, their stories, do you really love them? I don't think you do, right? If someone says they love you, but they don't care about where you're from, what you've done, what you like, what you know, what you don't like, what you care about, what you think is funny, do they love you? No. So we're gonna learn these stories about Jesus. We're gonna have a skeleton that we can hang the rest of the stuff on, his teachings, his parables, his miracles, and this is the final piece of that sort of skeleton project that we're working on. Easter, the day he rose from the dead, through Ascension, the day that Jesus ascended into heaven. First two words of the phrase that pays today: I am. I am. Okay, so Jesus has been buried. He was buried, remember, by Nicodemus and by Joseph of Arimathea in a new grave. A stone was placed in front of the grave. It was sealed with the seal of Rome. Soldiers were placed around the grave because the chief priests and the elders went to Pilate and said, you know, this guy said that he was going to be raised from the dead, so let's put some soldiers there so that the disciples don't steal his body and then pretend that he's been raised from the dead. So Pilate said, sure. Soldiers are posted. That's Friday night. Saturday goes through the day. Saturday night. Sunday morning, at sunrise, a group of women who were followers of Jesus, who loved Jesus, went to the tomb to further anoint his body. Remember Joseph and Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, not Joseph, Jesus' worldly dad, had done what they could, but they were playing beat the clock on Friday night. And so the women who'd watched wanted to do better for Jesus' body. They loved him, and they wanted to anoint his body for burial. And as they were going to the tomb, they were worried who's going to roll away the stone. Now, here the Gospels tell subtly different stories about what happened. And we can talk about this in class, but you know, this is an earth-shattering thing. I want you to imagine that there's a car accident on the highway, and 4 different people see it. They're going to have slightly different memories of how that went down, of what happened when and who said what when people got out of the cars. And, you know, if someone's been badly injured and badly killed, it makes the emotions go that much higher, and the stories are going to diverge just a little bit, right? So the same thing happens in the Gospels, that here the stories of Jesus' resurrection diverge just a little bit. Everybody agrees that the tomb was empty. Everybody agrees that this is something that's never been seen before. But exactly how it went down, there are minor disagreements about. So in one of the Gospels, as the women approach, there's an earthquake. An angel descends, and the angel, the stone bounces away in the earthquake, and the angel tells them, you know, who you looking for? If you're looking for Jesus, he ain't here. He's risen. Right? In another Gospel, they get there, and the stone is already rolled away, and there is a young man in white, an angel, who's sitting there and who tells them that Jesus has been raised, and that they should go and tell the disciples that Jesus has been raised as he told them. In another gospel, it's 2 angels that are there, but otherwise it's the same basic story. And then in one gospel, there's no one there, but the stone is rolled away, and they look in, and there's no one there, right? So the big pieces are the same, right? That the stone, the tomb is open, and it's empty, and the guards, well, they ain't there. In that first one, with the earthquake, the guards fall down in terror during the earthquake, and when the stone moves and the angel comes, they're out of there. They run away, right? So there may be questions about that, but that's the way it is. So the next couple words, the phrase that pays, the resurrection. The resurrection. So Jesus does appear then. In one gospel, Jesus appears to the women. The angel tells them to go tell the disciples that Jesus is raised. And as they're going, Jesus appears. And they fall down and they worship him. In another gospel, it's only Mary that's still around when Jesus appears. That Mary is there weeping, wondering where Jesus has gone and how this is possible. And through her tears, she sees a guy come near to her, and she thinks it's the gardener, and she says, please just tell me where you put him, and I'll take the body away. We won't be any trouble to you. Just tell me where he is. And Jesus says to her, Mary, and she knows that voice. And she says, Rabboni, Rabbi, Master. And she grabs a hold of him, and he says, don't cling to me. Don't hold on to me. I still have to go to my Father in heaven, and you go tell the disciples that I'm raised and that I'll meet them in Galilee like I told them. It's just this remarkable story. Now, in your sheets, one of the things I say to you is that the first evangelist, an evangelist is someone who carries good news, right? The first Christian preachers doing the first Christian sermon are women. Right? The angels tell them to go to the disciples, go tell the disciples. Jesus tells them to go tell the disciples, right? There are churches, and lots of them, who say that women can't be preachers. Women can't tell the good news of Jesus Christ, right? That it's wrong for women to do it. It's only for men to do it, period. And our church says, no. If Jesus said that the first Christian sermon, the first Christian preachers should be women, going and telling men what's going on, it's pretty hard to make the jump that women aren't allowed to tell the good news of Jesus Christ, right? It doesn't make any sense at all to us. At any rate, without picking too big a fight with some of my neighbors, the first Christian preachers on the first Christian sermon, ordered by the angels, ordered by Jesus, were these women. All right. Now, next couple words, phrase that pays, and the. All right. Now, this claim about Jesus being risen from the dead, we don't think that Jesus, well, first we think he was dead. We don't think that he felt peaked. We don't think he drifted off for a nap. Remember, he was crucified, he was flogged, then he was crucified, and then he had a spear stuffed up under his ribs and through his heart. We think Jesus was dead, as dead as you can possibly be. And then, when you're dead, you don't get better after a couple of days. Nobody knows, or nobody has ever thought, that the dead just get better. Everybody who's seen someone dead knows that this is not going to get better. So Jesus was dead. And we don't talk about, that Jesus' spirit, we do think Jesus' spirit is with us, but we don't think that Jesus is just drifting around like a cloud, like a spirit. We think that Jesus' body came back to life, that the Father vindicated Jesus, that Jesus was killed for being King of the Jews. When God brought him back, he is the King of the Jews. That Jesus was accused of being possessed of the devil. He said he was possessed of the Holy Spirit. When God brought him back from the dead, he's filled with the Holy Spirit. That all of the things that Jesus claimed that people thought was wrong, that people thought was blasphemous, and was part of the reasons that they had him put to death, God said, nope, That's right, and vindicated Jesus by bringing him back to life. There's a few things that we know, and then from then on, I can't prove to you that the dead man Jesus came back to life, a new kind of life. But I can walk you toward it if you just give me a little bit of time, right? First, nobody disagrees that the tomb was empty. And the reason that no one disagrees is because very shortly after finding the empty tomb, the disciples started crowing pretty loud that Jesus was alive, that they'd seen him, that he was alive. This was a problem for the Roman authorities because they'd had Jesus killed as a threat to the emperor. It's a problem to the Jewish authorities because they'd had Jesus killed because they thought he was blaspheming God, that what he was saying was against God and a risk, and put their whole religious enterprise at risk. So when the disciples start saying, he's alive, there is no one who wanted to produce a body more than the Roman authorities or the Jewish authorities. They would have loved to drag Jesus' moldering, rotting body out of the grave and say, here's your Messiah, here's your king. But they couldn't. They couldn't find the body. If they could have found it, they would have found it. If they could have and would have found it, they would have shown it. So, just for our purposes right here, where did the body go? Okay, that's up in the air, right? The Christians are saying Jesus has risen from the dead. That would be the first time that ever happened. And so what we're clear about as our jumping off point is that the tomb was empty, right? That there was no body left in the tomb. Now, there's a bunch of stories about that, where Peter and John run to the tomb and they find the empty tomb, and the grave cloths are still there. The cloth that was wrapped around Jesus' head is there. It's like he sort of evaporated up through them. It's just very weird. They're very puzzled, but the body's gone. Where did the body go? Now, we should probably say some more words of our phrase that pays. Life, and then a period, right? Those who. Life, period, those who. All right? So is that 4 things? I don't know, 3, 4? Now, where did the body go? And I list on your sheet, some possibilities, all right? So maybe everyone went to the wrong tomb. Yeah, probably not though, right? Because this is the one that had the Roman seal on it. That would have, the broken seal would have still been there. This is the one that had the guards camped out in front of it, right? Even if the guards aren't there, the campfire's still there, their gear is still there. The Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea had placed Jesus' body in a tomb, in a new tomb near Golgotha. It's unlikely they would have forgotten which tomb, into which tomb Jesus was placed. The women had watched it, and the women all had exactly the same memory of which tomb. They all go to that tomb. There's not one of them going, I think it's more over this way, right? When Jesus was put in the tomb, the Jewish authorities knew which tomb it was, and they asked Pilate, and he ordered the soldiers to go there. I mean, there's just an awful lot of people that are pretty clear that this is the tomb. And the claim is that it wasn't empty. The claim is that it still had the grave clothes in it. So you got this tomb, stone rolled away, still has a Roman seal on it. You got a whole bunch of soldier gear laying around. You got a whole bunch of people who think this is the tomb. When you look in it, it's not empty. It's got the grave clothes in it. The wrong tomb is pretty hard to believe, right? Some people will say, okay, the tomb was empty, but Jesus got better. He escaped, right? I want you to imagine being flogged, then crucified, then having a spear stuffed through your heart, right? And then you get wrapped in strips of cloth and 100 pounds of spices, and you get stuck in a cave that's about 55 degrees, because that's what the temperature is underground all the time. And then they roll the stone in front of it, and they leave you for 3 days. And after 3 days, you get to feeling better, and you manage to fight off and to fight your way through those wrappings with your crucified hands. You push that stone out of the way and overpower the guards. With your crucified feet, you walk out of there. Your pierced heart is beating just fine, because that got better too. And you're so perky that when you run into the women and to your disciples a little bit later, everybody believes you've risen from the dead, because you're just the picture of health. Come on. Some people say, yes, the tomb was empty, but grave robbers stole the body. Okay, so these would be the stupidest grave robbers in the history of grave robbing, right? For one thing, they attacked a tomb that was guarded by Roman soldiers and sealed with a Roman seal. That's not very smart. Second, when they wanted to get into a tomb that was that had this huge stone rolled in front of it, instead of something easier. Third, they went into the tomb of a guy who'd been publicly crucified and buried on the quick. So they knew in advance that there was nothing that had been buried with him, right? When you're crucified, you're stripped naked. They took him off the cross, they wrapped him up, and they put him in the tomb, and they shut the rock. So they know that there's no gold there, there's no prizes there, there's no treasures there. And this was a poor man to start with. I mean, Jesus didn't have a lot of money. He had a robe and sandals. That's what he had when he was crucified. And then they take the body, but they leave the wrappings that have the 100 pounds of spices in them. I mean, there would have been some value in those spices, in those aromatic gums. They could have scraped it off the linens. These have to be the worst grave robbers in the history of grave robbing. It's just too stupid to be believed, right? Grave robbers stole the body? I don't think so. Some people say, okay, the tomb is empty, but the authorities stole the body. Which authorities? The Roman authorities fought off Roman guards and broke the Roman seal to steal Jesus' body? For what reason? I mean, Jesus had claimed to be a king. The Romans wanted him dead. If they'd stolen the body and the disciples started talking about how he's risen from the dead, the Romans would have been delighted to produce the body. They never did. The Jewish authorities stole the body. They had Jesus put down because they thought he was blaspheming God, pretending to be God. Him rising from the dead is a horrible thing for Judaism. It very quickly began dividing Jewish families and Jewish synagogues, one from another. Some people would say Jesus was the Messiah, and other people wouldn't. They would have been happy as clams to produce Jesus' body. It makes zero sense that the authorities stole his body. Other people will say, yes, the tomb was empty, but the disciples stole the body. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's say that these guys who absolutely panicked and ran away when Jesus was arrested found their nerve. That Judas is dead by now, but Peter, who betrayed Jesus, who denied Jesus, finds his nerve. They all get together. They find some weapons. They overpower the Roman guards, and then they take Jesus' body out of the tomb, leave the wrappings there to confuse everybody, go bury Jesus' body out in the sand of the desert someplace, and they pretend that Jesus has risen from the dead, I guess because it would make them big shots, right? That they're the followers of this guy who's risen from the dead. Okay, so far so good. What you might not remember is that very quickly it became illegal to be a Christian. Very quickly, the apostles became hunted men. And all of them but one died for the faith. James was beheaded. Another was stoned. Peter was crucified upside down. Now, we got 11 apostles after Judas kills himself. Then Matthias joins the merry band, right? So let's say you lied about something. And 11 of your friends knew about it, knew it was a lie. You were all in it together. And let's say one of your friends was killed for saying that lie. Are you going to keep telling that lie? Let's say that another of your friends gets killed for that lie. Now there's 10 of you left and 2 of you have been killed for telling that lie. How many of the 10 are going to keep telling that lie? I think the answer is 0. How about after the 3rd one of you gets killed? Or the 4th? Or the 5th? Are the last group going to keep telling that lie? When Peter was crucified, right, when he figured out how they were going to kill him, Peter said to the guards who were going to kill him, "I'm not worthy to die like Jesus. Please don't do this to me." And they laughed at him and they crucified him upside down so he wouldn't be like Jesus. Now he's hanging there on the cross, probably for a couple of days, upside down, naked in the sun. Do you think he's, at some point, if he knows it's a lie, isn't going to say, "Boys, I'm sorry, take me down off this cross, it was all a lie"? You don't hang there and suffer until you're dead if you know it's a lie. The disciples didn't take the body. That's pretty much the stupidest possibility of all. And so, when you have an empty tomb and all of the other explanations for the missing body are worse than the explanation that we believe, maybe we're on to something, right? I mean, it's not the wrong tomb. Jesus didn't get better. He didn't escape. Nobody stole his body, not grave robbers, not the authorities, not the disciples, which leaves what? The claim that we have, that Jesus rose from the dead. Next 3 words, the phrase that pays: believe in me. Believe in me. Now, there are also other reasons that Christians think that resurrection, coming back to life, is the most likely explanation for this empty tomb, right? We've got a lot of people who say they saw Jesus when he was raised, right? That he appeared to groups, to the disciples, to some other leaders of the church. He appeared later to Paul. He appeared to his little brother James and made James the head of the church, right? That he showed up to a lot of people. How many witnesses do you need to believe something? I mean, if 30 or 40 people tell you that the score of the Packers game, was 14-7, right? I mean, that's probably what it was, right? I mean, if 40 people tell you that thus and so's house burned down, well, that's probably what happened. And we got a lot of witnesses that say they saw Jesus after he was killed. We got the transformation of the disciples. Remember, on the night he was arrested, one betrayed him, one denied him, and the rest ran away. So, they went from 0 to 60, because suddenly they're out in the streets telling people Jesus is alive. Suddenly they're in the temple telling people Jesus is alive. They were impossible to silence, that they would not shut up about it. They got arrested, they got imprisoned, they got flogged, they got beaten, they got stoned, they got killed. And still, these guys who had been such terrible cowards hung on to this story. Boy, if Jesus isn't alive, why would they do that? We got the power of the church over time, that a whole lot of societies have been transformed by the power of Christianity. A whole lot of communities have been transformed by the power of Christianity. Orphanages have been built, hospitals have been built, schools have been built, universities have been built. People have fought against slavery, have fought for the full and equal participation of women in society, the full equality of the different races, that something is motivating that. Something is making that train go. We got billions of people who say that they experience Jesus, that when they pray, there's somebody there. That when they're in need, they hear a whisper from someone who's alive. And it's a lot of people over thousands of years. And then we still have people's lives who are transformed today. That they will have a moment with Jesus where they come to believe that Jesus has called their name, and they're transformed, sometimes instantly, most often over time. There's a great story about a guy named Billy Sunday who lived just a wild, awful life, and then Jesus found him, and Jesus turned him around, and Billy became a preacher. And one day he was being mocked. People were heckling him. You can't really believe that Jesus walked on water. You can't really believe all these miracles of Jesus. And Billy didn't miss a beat, and he just said, I wasn't there. I don't know about that. But let me tell you what I do know. In my house, Jesus changed whiskey into furniture. Right? That he was living this dissolute life. He was living this crazy life that was impoverishing himself and his family. And when he found Jesus, when Jesus found him, everything changed. He became a different person. He was set free from some of his vices. He was given the strength to work through others, and his life was transformed. There are a lot of people around you who will tell you, if you get them in the right moment, that their lives have been transformed and are being transformed by Jesus, who is alive. Next two words of the phrase that pays, even though. All right, so these guards that were there, right? The earthquake happens, they fall down as if they're dead, they run away. The Jewish authorities go and find these guys, and they say, listen, let's just say that the disciples stole the body. We're going to give you some money here, and we're going to protect you with Pilate. So, there's not going to be any recriminations against you. You're not going to be in trouble. Here's some cash for your trouble. Just tell everybody the disciples stole the body, that they overpowered you and stole the body. Okay, so that's the story, but it's a stupid story because none of them were wounded, right? I mean, do you think they hacked each other with swords a little bit to make it look like they'd been overpowered by the disciples? That's just not how Roman soldiers worked. Remember, if you were a jailer and you had a prisoner, you were a Roman soldier and the prisoner escapes, you become the prisoner. If you're supposed to kill someone and you don't get it done, they're going to kill you. These guards could not have gone on living and breathing the air if they had failed this utterly in their duties, if they had run away from their duty. They don't have any injuries. They weren't knocked out. They weren't cut up. No, it's just dumb. But that's the story. Now, Jesus appears to his disciples. We'll get to that in a minute. But one of the places where Jesus appears is walking down the road with a couple of his followers. Right? The story is called the road to Emmaus. By the way, the next two words in the phrase that pays, they die, comma. They die, comma. So Jesus is walking, these two people, the followers of Jesus, are walking down the road. They're feeling very, very sad, and they're joined by a stranger. It's Jesus. They don't recognize him, though, which is something we can talk about. But they travel, and Jesus says to them, the stranger says to him, "Why are you so sad?" And they say, "Are you the only person who doesn't know what's going on in Jerusalem these past few days?" And he says, "Well, fill me in." And they say, we had a master that we thought was a mighty prophet. We thought he was the Messiah. And he got himself killed. And there's crazy talk from the women of our group that he's raised from the dead, but that's nonsense. And we're going home. And the stranger leads them through the Old Testament, leads them through all the Bible stories, all the prophecies, showing how this had to happen to the Messiah, to the Son of Man, and it's the best Bible lesson they ever got. Now they get to their house in Emmaus, which is it 7 miles or 14 miles? It's some reasonable walking distance from Jerusalem. They get to their house. It's late in the afternoon. The stranger acts like he's going to keep going, and they say to him, no, it's not safe. Come stay with us. Come be in our house. You can continue your journey tomorrow. So they go into this house. And they're putting meal out, and they sit down at the meal, and Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it. And as he breaks the bread, they see him. I mean, maybe it's the crucified hands, maybe it's a remembrance of the Last Supper, maybe they just, that however it is that he's disguised himself from their eyes, suddenly they see, and he disappears. And they get up that second and they run back to Jerusalem where they're looking for the disciples. Now, when they get to the disciples, Jesus has appeared to them too. The living disciples, except for Thomas, so 10 of them, have gathered in a locked room. They're afraid that what happened to their master is going to happen to them. And while they're in this locked room, Jesus appears to them. And Jesus says to them, peace be with you. Look at me. Here's my hands. Here's my side. It's me. They think he's a ghost. They're terrified out of their minds. So he eats some fish in front of them. Ghosts don't eat fish, and they lose their minds. Right? They just go crazy because he's alive. Now, the next day, they see Thomas and they tell Thomas about this, right? They're just bubbly. And Thomas says, listen, dead people don't get better. I watched the man die. He's dead. It's over. I tell you what, unless I can stick my fingers in the nail marks, unless I can stick my hand up into his side, he's dead. What's the matter with you guys? So, a few days after that, a week after the first appearance, right? I mean, we skipped over the people from Emmaus. They come dashing into the disciples' presence, and they learn that Jesus has been there with the disciples too. That he moves around pretty fast in his resurrected body. So a week later, Thomas is with the disciples, and Jesus again appears in their midst through locked doors, and he says, "Peace be with you." And then he says, "Hey, Thomas, here you go. You can stick your fingers in my nail holes. You can touch my side." And Thomas, how does Jesus know this, that he made that demand? And Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." For the first time, someone really is clear who Jesus is. Right? And Jesus says, blessed are those who haven't seen what you've seen and still believed. That's you guys. Right? There's another story where Jesus appears to the 11 when they're in Galilee, that they worship him. There's a story in John that they've all gone fishing, and they're out fishing. It's the middle of the night. They're fishing, nothing. When dawn comes, they look to the shore and they see a figure on the shore, but they don't recognize him. It's Jesus. He says, "Hey, how's the fishing?" Yells across the water. They say, "We got nothing. We got skunked." He says, "Put down your nets again." Right? They put down their nets and wham! They just get pounded with this huge catch, this huge school of fish. And Peter and John look at each other and they go, "That's the Lord." And Peter, who apparently liked fishing naked, right, throws on his clothes and he jumps into the water and he swims to shore. And the other disciples, they struggle to bring the boat in with all these fish. There's 153 of them. We can talk about that if you want. But there's 153 fish. And Jesus has got a fire going on the beach. He's cooked them some bread. He asks them to go get some fish. He cooks the fish for them. He feeds them. And then he works things out with Peter. Right? He says to Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "I love you." And Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." And then a little bit later, he says, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, we just did this, but I love you." And Jesus says, "Tend my lambs." And then a little while later, Jesus says to Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter now is heartbroken. He says, I love you. Why do you keep asking me this? And Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." Right? That he gives Peter a job, and he gives him the 3 times to say that he loves Jesus to make up for the 3 times that he said he didn't know Jesus. Remember? I mean, how merciful is that? How kind is that? It's just a beautiful thing. So Peter and Jesus work things out. Jesus tells Peter that he's going to die for his service to Jesus, and he tells him how he's going to die. It's just they work things out. A little bit later, Jesus leads them out toward Bethany, and then up on top of a hill, he gives them what's called the Great Commission, his last words to them, sort of his driveway speech to the disciples. He says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and lo, I am with you always to the ends of the age. So that's his final speech. You know, when mom and dad leave you home for an evening or for a weekend, and they say, as they're leaving, remember, no fires, no guns, no alcohol, no crime. I mean, whatever it is your parents say to you. Right? I mean, that's the stuff that they really want you to hang on to. It's probably more like do the dishes and clean your room and don't fight with your brother. But, whatever it is they say, that's the thing. Jesus' goodbye message, go and make disciples, baptizing them, teach them to obey. I'm with you always. And then Jesus rises up into heaven. And, they're all watching him, open mouths, and a couple angels show up and they say, what are you doing looking up into heaven? He's not with you right now. Go into Jerusalem and wait until you're vested with power from on high. Remember, Jesus told you that he'd send his Spirit to you. That's going to happen. Go into Jerusalem. Wait. The Spirit is coming. The last couple words of our phrase that pays, will live, right? And you can throw an exclamation point on the end of that. Now, of course, this is the words of Jesus, right? So will live with an exclamation point from Jesus. All right, those are the big stories of Jesus' life between Easter, between his resurrection and his ascension, this floating up into heaven. I'm looking forward to talking to you on the 16th. Need 3 good discussion questions, 2 from this material at least, and 1 from anything else if you choose. But they can all be from here if you want. You take care of yourself. Bye-bye.